This is a quick demo video of how to use web-based CommonLook PDF Simplified Editor to create an accessible PDF, conforming with the PDF UA standard. To get started, navigate to web-based CommonLook PDF and log in. You'll be taken to your dashboard, where you'll be able to find summary information of the work you've done in the past. It will list by type your total completed documents and will let you see data related to this month or overall. Also, in Your Action Needed, it will list any documents that are in progress or pending your input. To start a new remediation project, in the menu on the left, choose Remediations. Next, to begin working on a document, choose Start New. The New Remediations wizard screen will open. At the top of the wizard, it outlines the overall steps in the process. You'll begin with document details, and then the web-based CommonLook PDF Simplified Editor will walk you through the steps of file assessment, content extraction, creating the accessible output, and finally, you'll be able to download your accessible PDF. To start the process, upload the PDF you want to make accessible by either dragging and dropping it into the widget or by browsing to locate and select the file. With the document loaded in the system, hit the Next button. Next, you need to choose a remediation path. Select the radio button for the simplified editor if it is not already selected and hit Next. CommonLook PDF has completed the file assessment step. This is where the file is assessed to determine if the content can be extracted. Hit Next again. The system now begins the content extraction step, detecting and analyzing the document content. Depending on the length of your document, this may take several minutes or so. When the simplified editor is done analyzing the content of the document, it'll stop on the screen as shown below, indicating that some pages could not be resolved automatically. While the simplified editor is highly automated, there are sections of documents that may require your input. For example, there is an image in the document that needs to have alt text assigned to it, and there are some page elements that the simplified editor wants you to clarify. To progress, keep the sliders in their default positions and hit Next. In the image's description step, in the panel on the right, provide the alt text for the image. Diagram of a fern. For documents with more than one image, use the arrow buttons above the image to go to the next or previous image in the document to verify or add alt text. When you are finished adding alt text to the image, hit the Next button. Next is the clarifying page elements step. Here we see on the left side of the interface two warnings that point to elements that need your attention. In this sample file, we see that there is some unidentified content, and we have to verify form field tooltip text. Next to each of those warnings, use the Expand button to show a description of the issue and how to correct it. Hovering your mouse over either warning or clicking on them will highlight on the page view where the issues are. Warning or no warning, a best practice is to check each piece of content in the document, ensuring it has been handled correctly. Beginning at the top of the document, the title of the document has been placed in an H1 container, which is exactly the right heading container for the title, so you can move on to the next piece of content. The next piece of content has been placed in a text container. Text page elements such as this will be placed in paragraph tags in the remediated document. Notice that there is an iCircle icon, indicating that there is an inline element inside it. This is because there is a form field for someone to enter their name there too. If you hover your mouse over it, a tooltip appears that says, "Click here to see inline elements." Next, verify the tooltip of the form. In order to check the tooltip, you will first need to click on the inline icon so that the inline elements toolbar opens. Then click on the form field, which opens the Form Field Details dialog box. In this case, the tooltip, student name, is correct. But if you did want to make any changes, you would do so in the tooltip field and then press Save. Once that is done, you can close the inline toolbar by selecting the Close button. The next two pieces of content have been identified as H1s, However, the H1 heading level is assigned to the title of the document, and subsequent heading levels need to be correctly identified. It may be helpful to think of heading level organization similar to that of an outline. For example, the title of the document would be assigned H1. Major sections, like chapters in a book, would be tagged as H2, and subsections within chapters would be marked as H3. So, the heading level for scientific method needs to be changed to an H2 container. And because experimental question is a subsection of scientific method, this content needs to be changed into an H3 container. To change the heading levels for this content, you can click the H1 container for scientific method, and then in the toolbar, open the drop-down menu for headings and select the H2 option. Next, change the heading level for the experimental question content by again clicking on the container, opening the heading drop-down menu, and this time selecting the H3 option. As we move down through the document, we see the next piece of content is a paragraph and has been placed in a text container. This is correct, as all elements identified as text will be placed in P tags so we can move on. Directly under the paragraph, we have another heading, but we need to change it to the correct heading level. If the container label is in the way of the text, the Simplified Editor has a quick keyboard shortcut to hide the labels, so you can read the text under them. Holding down the H key reveals that the heading says Experiment Data, and because it is a part of the Scientific Method section, which is at the H2 level, it should be labeled as an H3. You can change this easily by clicking on the container to open the toolbar and selecting H3 in the heading drop-down menu. The next piece of content is in a table container. The good news here is that the table was properly identified by the Simplified Editor, but we do need to open the table to ensure all the cells are organized correctly. To do this, select the table container and then select the Table button in the toolbar. The Table toolbar opens, and inside the table headers, both column and row, have been identified as well as the borders of all the cells in the table. Notice there is one cell in the table that should span 2 columns. This is the data cell that has the number 25 in it. This is something we can easily fix with the Table toolbar. First, select the cell with the number 25 in it. Next, click and hold, and then drag your mouse to the right so that when you let go of your mouse button, you will have both cells selected. Both the cells that need to be merged should now be highlighted in the table. Once highlighted, select the Merge button in the Table toolbar, and the red line dividing the cells disappears, indicating the cells are now merged. Close the Table toolbar by pressing Close. The image to the right of the table is in an image container, and I have already provided the image description in one of our very first steps. So we can move down to the next piece of content. In this case, we have a short paragraph. I will need to identify the paragraph. Draw a box around the sentence and choose the Text button in the toolbar. The content under this paragraph is labeled in a list container. This container has been correctly labeled, but we should also check if the list items are all at one level and each of the bullet points have been identified. To check the list structure, select the list container and then select the List button in the toolbar. You'll notice that it is difficult to read the inner parts of the list showing the individual list items. If you zoom in on this content, it will become clearer. You can zoom in using the buttons at the top of the interface. With the list zoomed in, notice there are circles with an L1 inside, indicating that all 3 list items are at the first list level. This is correct because there are no nested lists inside any of these list items. Another thing to check in lists is if the list labels are highlighted, all of the bullet points have been recognized and so they will be tagged in the PDF. Close the list toolbar by selecting the Close button. Zoom back out if you have not done so already to check the next piece of content. We have another heading, but this one should be at the H2 level. Select this heading container, open the Headings drop-down and select H2. Next, we have another list. Again, select the list container and then select the List button in the toolbar. to examine the list components to ensure the items are at the same level and the labels have been identified. After checking the list, select the Close button. The last piece of content on this page is a footnote. However, it is not inside of a container. To identify this content as a footnote, draw a box around the footnote with your mouse in the page view. Then select the Footnote button in the toolbar. This will place the footnote in a footnote container. Now that you have worked your way through all of the page elements on page 1, it's time to check and fix the reading order. At the upper right-hand corner of the interface, select the Reading Order button. The system will attempt to detect the reading order automatically and will assign a number to each container. These numbers indicate the order in which those tags will be placed in the PDF. Notice in our example, the reading order follows the order of the content from the top left to the bottom right of the page. However, because this document has a list that spans the page break, we will need to make an adjustment to the reading order of the footnote at the bottom of page 1. Because the footnote is mentioned in the 5th container, we can move the footnote to be read directly after that paragraph. Select the Reorder button up at the top left and begin to reorder the containers, starting with the title and working your way down to the 5th container. After this paragraph, jump down to the bottom of the page to number the footnote container as 6. Now head back up to the heading container for Experimental Data and continue selecting the rest of the containers straight down the page. Now that you have addressed both identifying page elements and reading order, press the Next button at the bottom left of the screen. A warning text box appears, asking if you want to complete clarification and continue to the next step. Choose the Yes Continue button and then hit the Next button to move on to reviewing the document. In the full document review step, you will now be able to verify page elements, reading order, and connections on every page of the document. Because we have just checked and fixed the page elements and reading order on page 1, select the next page arrow to advance to page 2. The page elements and reading order of the content need to be checked and fixed. Select the list container at the top of the page and press the List button. All the list items are at the L1 level, and all the label numbers have been identified. This is correct, so you can close the List toolbar. Under the list, the next content is in a Heading 1 container. However, it needs to be changed to an H2. Click inside of the heading container, open the Heading dropdown and select H2. The last container on this page is a paragraph and is inside of a text container. This is perfect and doesn't need any adjustments. To check the reading order of the content on page 2, select the Reading Order button to ensure the 3 containers on this page are in the correct reading order. This is also perfect and doesn't need to be adjusted. Now that both the page elements and reading order have been checked and fixed on both pages, the last thing to check are connections. This document has a list that spans the page break. You need to ensure these pieces of content are connected so that the list is treated as one continuous list, not 2 separate ones. Select the previous page icon at the center right side of the interface to return to page 1. To make the connection, select the Connections button on page 1 and check the checkbox of the list we need to connect to the list on page 2. Hit Next Page. Select the checkbox of the list at the top of the page to indicate what we want to connect to the list, and in the Connection Details pop-up screen, select the button for lists. This will ensure you connect the lists on the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2, and not an L body that spans the page break. Lastly, hit Confirm. After pressing Confirm, you will now see a blue arrow pointing to the list container on this page. You can check to ensure the connection was made correctly on the first page by pressing the Previous Page button, and check to see that there is a blue arrow at the bottom right, showing the connection of the list on page 1. Lastly, select the End Review button, and in the warning dialog box that opens, select the Yes Continue button to begin the conversion process. A message will appear letting you know that your remediation is complete and ready for download. You can either download the document and the validation reports on this screen by selecting the Downloads buttons, or hold off and download them from the remediation screen at a later time. Hit Finish to return to the new remediation screen. Here you will find the list of files that you've worked on in the past, and if they have been completed, you'll be able to download the PDF and validation report from here too. So if you ever need to get another copy of a file that you've previously remediated, you don't need to run it again. You can simply navigate to your remediations page and re-download the file you want. When the file downloads, it will save with the original file name and a UA will be added to the end. Let's check the original PDF and the one we just ran through CommonLook's Simplified Editor. With Adobe Acrobat Pro open, the original document did not contain any tags. Without PDF tags, assistive technologies will not be able to properly communicate the content in the document to the user. However, the UA version that we just remediated contains tags. Scanning down the tags, there is an H1 tag containing the title, followed by a paragraph tag. Opening this P tag shows the text and form tag inside. The following two tags are H2 and H3. Opening the next paragraph tag reveals a reference tag for the footnote reference. This is something that the Simplified Editor recognized automatically. It did the heavy lifting of identifying this element and tagging it correctly. The next tag in the tags tree, the note tag, is for the footnote. And when selected, notice the actual physical location of the note is under the list. But by moving the tag up in the tags tree, now someone using a screen reader will be able to hear the footnote closer to when it was referenced. Selecting and opening the following table tag, there are TR tags for each row in the table. In the first TR, there are 3 TH tags for the column headers. And in the second TR tag, there is 1 TH for the row header and a TD, which is for the table data cell with the number 25. Opening the rest of the TR tags reveals this table tag is correctly structured and will read correctly to someone using assistive technology. By being able to work directly inside of the document to identify elements, CommonLook's Simplified Editor makes tagging tables a breeze. The next tag is a figure tag. When exploring the properties of this tag, check the alternative text, diagram of a fern, and verify this is correct. Moving down the tags tree, there is a list tag. Opening the list tag, there are 3 LI or list item tags inside, and the corresponding content highlights on the page. Opening each LI tag shows an LBL or label tag holding the bullet, and an L body tag holding the text portion of the list. While the rest of the tagging looks good, let's check out the second list that spans the page break. Notice that when the list tag is selected, it highlights the entire list starting at the bottom of page 1 and going on to page 2. By using the connections function in the Simplified Editor, this is going to be read as one continual list instead of 2. The last 2 tags, an H2 and paragraph, are correct, so that wraps up the document. The final thing to check is the validation report. The validation report will have the same name as the PDF file we have just remediated, with the addition of -report at the end. This report is an accessible Excel file showing how the document conformed with the PDF UA 1.0 standard. At the top of the report, there is a summary of the number of verifications that passed, failed, have warnings, user verifications, or are not applicable. Under the summary, there is a table listing all the checkpoints tested for PDF UA. Past items were passed by CommonLook and did not need a user to verify them. The checkpoints marked user verifications or warning are checkpoints that a computer cannot automatically determine are passable. For example, these results check if graphical images are given correct alternative text, or if a tooltip provided for a form is enough information. From the report, we can see there are no failures. Scanning down the listed user verifications and warnings, we see that these are things we have already verified while working our way through the document and don't present any issues. I hope you have found this quick demo informative and helpful. Please contact us at sales@alliant.com with any questions. Thanks for watching and happy remediating.